Alright, so today I want to introduce you to the black fire ball python. The black fire consists of two genes, the black pastel and the fire, and it's a pretty interesting combination. The black pastel is a dark gene. You actually mix it with other combinations, and a lot of times it'll darken the background of the combination, and the fire is a lightning gene. So essentially what you're doing is you're mixing a dark gene and a light gene in the same snake, and it makes for a really interesting combination. A lot of times it kind of gives this effect where it almost looks like a ghost, where it's kind of smooths out, makes for like a creamy appearance in the snake, makes for some really amazing combinations. So today I want to jump over the internet and now I want to show you the potential of the black fire ball python. Alright, so I'm going to jump over here on Morphmarket.com, and I want to start with the two genes that make up the black fire. And this is the first one. This is a black pastel. The black pastel I would consider to be a true dark morph. If you mix it with other genes, a lot of times you'll actually get a really dark background. And the black pastel is really similar to cinnamon. As a matter of fact, it's actually allelic with cinnamon, so if you actually made a black pastel cinnamon and you bred it to something else, half the offspring would come out as black pastel, half the offspring would come out as cinnamon. And as far as the visual appearance between the black pastel and the cinnamon, there's a little bit of overlap because of the variability of both of the genes. But I'd say in general, I think the black pastel has more of a gold color as far as the color of the pattern. And usually it has a lot darker of a background. You can see on this one, it's almost like an inkjet black background on this black pastel. So here is another component of the black fire, and that is the fire. The fire is a pretty interesting gene, and as a standalone morph, a lot of times it can almost look like a normal. You can see on this one looks quite a bit reduced, almost looks like maybe a little bit, almost like an inchy as far as the reduction. A lot of times they look almost like normals. It can be pretty variable as far as the pattern. Usually they're not this reduced, and a lot of times they have kind of this creamy color compared to a normal. And the fire is actually in the black-eyed leucistic complex. So if you breed two fires together, you get an all-white snake with black eyes. So if you actually take a fire and you breed it to a black pastel, this is what you get. You get the black fire. Take a look at this snake. This is a pretty amazing combination. If you actually look at it, it almost looks like it's faded out, almost like a ghost. The ghost is a recessive gene where you need two copies of the ghost for a visual, and this doesn't have any ghost in it, but it looks really close to a ghost. And it's almost like that it's struggling for competition between being a light snake and a dark snake. It's kind of interesting. And you can tell on this one, the black pastel, a lot of times with black pastel in combinations, a lot of times it'll really wipe out the patterns. Look at the patterns on this one, how they're kind of jumbled and kind of streaked all along the sides of the snake. And I think the coolest thing about the black fire is if you actually take two black fires and you breed them together, it's actually not an allelic complex. So you'll actually get normals, you'll get black pastels, you'll get fires, but this is what you'll also get. Take a look at this. You'll also get this snake right here. This is a super black pastel, and take a look how black this thing is. Pretty amazing snake that you'd actually get this from that combination. And the other thing you get from breeding two black fires together, take a look at this. You'd also get a super fire. So you'd actually get completely black snakes and almost completely white snakes. Quite an amazing breeding between two black fires. And the super fire, if you actually look really close at it, sometimes the super fires are not completely white. Sometimes they have just a little bit of like really faint splotches of white up or yellow up on top of the white snake. As a matter of fact, you can also do this with the sulfur. A lot of people think the sulfur is another line of fire, and usually with the sulfur, especially with the super sulfur, you can see it usually has a really bright yellow kind of splotches on the back of the snake compared to the fire. But I'd say the fire is a lot more common than the sulfur. So I kind of wanted to show you some of these other genes mixed in with the black fire so you can see kind of how it affects the combination when mixing in other genes. And the first one I want to start with is the banana. This is what the banana looks like. And when it comes to visual dominance, the banana is probably the most visually dominant. You mix banana in with anything else and you can definitely tell bananas in the mix. And here's what happens if you work banana into the black fire. Take a look at this. It's pretty amazing that you can actually, it's almost like overwhelming the banana. You can definitely see the bananas in there, and it makes it, as a matter of fact, if someone handed me this thing, I'd say that kind of looks like, you know, a banana ghost combination. You could definitely see the cinnamon in there, kind of darkening the background, and it's the addition of the fire, between the fire and the black pastel, that kind of fades it out and gives it this creamy looking appearance, almost like a ghost. Pretty amazing. So here is the Pinstripe. The Pinstripe is one of my favorite jeans. It's probably the brightest gold standalone jean you can get. The other one that's pretty close is the Spider. Some of the Spiders can be pretty gold. And the Pinstripe usually has a really strong, really thick stripe right down the top of the snake. And here's what happens if you work Pinstripe into the black fire. Take a look at this combination. This is actually the Pinstripe Black Fire, also known as the Black Firing Pin. Some of these names are kind of interesting. The firing pin is actually the combination of the pinstripe and the fire. So it's like fire pin, short for fire pinstripe. It's kind of an interesting slang, the firing pin. So this is the black firing pin. And take a look at how it just kind of scrambles up the pattern. Almost looks kind of like a pinstripe. You can definitely tell the color and kind of the stripe coming down the back. And then the black pastel really kind of shatters the pattern, and then really kind of gives it a lot of the dark color as far as some of the background color. Pretty amazing. So the Pastel is quite an interesting jean when you mix it into the black fire. The Pastel is probably one of the most common jeans in all ball pythons, and a lot of them can be really variable. Sometimes they can be really bright yellow, sometimes they can be kind of browned out, and I'd say most of the times with pastels, just as a single standalone morph, a lot of times as it ages and matures, a lot of times it'll really fade, a kind of brown out into kind of a brownish yellow color. And usually the pastels, when they're hatchlings, they're super bright. And a lot of times the pastels will be really reduced as far as the pattern. Sometimes they can be almost like tiger stripes, and sometimes you almost don't get any reduction at all. I'd say the pastel is pretty well known for having the bright yellow color. So here's what happens if you work pastel into the black fire. Take a look at this. And you're probably scratching your head thinking, hey, what happened to my black fire? I just kind of completely changed it. And essentially what happened is this is actually called a black pewter fire. So the black pewter is a combination of the black pastel and the pastel, and I'd say probably at least 50% of the time when you mix those two jeans together to get the black pewter, most of the times you actually get a silver colored snake. And if you actually make the silver snake with the black pewter, a lot of times it's really visually dominant, and it can just dominate all the other jeans in the mix. So you can see on this one, you kind of make the silver snake. As a matter of fact, if you actually make the silver snake, there's not a whole lot you can actually add to the silver snake to take away the silver. Usually you end up with some kind of a modified silver snake, which is really awesome. Some of these black pewters are like so metallic and silver colored, it's pretty amazing. So here is the Mojave. The Mojave is actually in the blue-eyed leucistic. So this gets a little bit complicated. As a matter of fact, if you actually had a Mojave black fire and you bred two of them together, you could actually get an all-white snake with blue eyes, you could get an all-white snake with black eyes, and you could get a completely black patternless snake. You could get a lot of crazy combinations from the Mojave black fires. And the Mojave, essentially what it does is it's in the blue-eyed leucistic complex, and it really usually, in a lot of combinations, you'll actually see the Mojave have these keyhole patterns on the sides of the snake. And in a lot of combinations, it really carries over these kind of like almost like you could put a skeleton key in the side of the pattern here on the snake. And this is what happens if you work Mojave into the black fire. Take a look at this. This is kind of an interesting combination. Essentially what it is it lightens it just a little bit. As a matter of fact, if you go back and look just at the black fire, you can see it's a little bit darker, and it really scrambles up the pattern on the side. And if you actually compare it to the Mojave black fire, you can see it lightens it a little bit, and it really brings in these kind of keyhole patterns on the sides. And a lot of times with the Mojave, sometimes it can actually really give you some striping on the back of the snake too. So here is the lesser. The lesser is also in the blue-eyed leucistic complex, so it's kind of the same thing. If you took two lesser black fires and bred them together, you'd get the white snake with the blue eyes, the white snake with the black eyes, and the completely black snake, which is pretty awesome. And usually lesser, when you work it in a lot of combinations, it'll really bring in a lot of high contrast and definition. It can really brighten some snakes and make, you know, kind of keep the high definition, which is pretty awesome. And here's what happens if you work lesser into the black fire. Take a look at this. This is a crazy combination. This is the black pastel lesser fire, or yeah, it would be actually the lesser black fire. Pretty amazing combination. And it's kind of the interesting thing about this one is how it completely wipes out the pattern on the sides of the snake. And a lot of times if you work lesser into combinations, you can see you have a lot of brightness and a lot of high contrast between the different colors. Pretty amazing combo. So here is the acid. The acid, I'd say it's pretty much one of the newcomers on the block when it comes to ball python genes. A lot of people think the acid is the same as the static, which is, a lot of people think it's also the same as the confusion. Pretty much different lines of the same gene. Some people think they're the same thing. And essentially what it is it almost acts kind of like a leopard. A leopard has a really jumbled up pattern. And I'd say when you mix acid into other combinations, it's almost like a leopard on steroids. It like completely shatters the pattern in a lot of cases working acid into combos. So here's what happens if you work acid into the black fire. Take a look at this. This is pretty amazing. You can definitely see the acid really dominates the color on this one and really dominates the pattern too. Really visually dominant. And you can actually see some of the kind of the exploded pattern on the sides from the acid. This one's actually called strychnine, which is kind of an interesting name for this combination. So here is the vanilla, and as a matter of fact the vanilla looks pretty much almost exactly like a fire as a standalone morph. You can actually make a vanilla cream, which is a vanilla fire combination, which is allelic, produce half vanillas and half fires, and a lot of people, they can't tell the difference between a vanilla and a fire, and a lot of times you come over here looking for vanillas and it'll say vanilla / fire because it's one or the other. A lot of people can't figure out which one it is just by looking at the visual appearance. So here's what happens if you work vanilla into the black fire. Take a look at this. This is a really interesting effect. And essentially what's happening here is the vanilla is allelic with fire, making kind of like an allelic that's kind of acts like a super, and it gives a really incredible crazy pattern on this. As a matter of fact, you can actually make pastel into this and make the vanilla scream, kind of the interesting names on some of these combinations. So the vanilla cream is actually the combination of the vanilla and the fire, and then you add the black pastel on top of it, and it looks almost exactly like a vanilla cream, except you're really darkening it with the black pastel. So here's the last one I wanted to show you, and that is clown, working clown into the black fire. And the clown, I would say, is pretty much the king of combos when it comes to recessive genes. It's actually recessive, so you need 2 copies of the clown for a visual. So if you actually took the black fire and you bred it to a clown, you would get, a certain percent of the time, you would get black fire's het clown, and then you'd have to actually breed those together to get the visual clown, or you could breed it to like a het clown or a visual clown to actually get the clown. As a matter of fact, both the black pastel and the fire are they're co-dominant, so you can actually breed them to something and half the offspring come out as black pastel or fire, which is pretty awesome. So here's what happens if you work clown into the black fire. Take a look at this crazy snake. That is probably one of the most amazing clown combos I've seen. Almost has this coppery sheen to it, and you have a really interesting effect. The fire is really darkening, it really lightening the background, and then you kind of get these dark lines around the kind of the patterns. I'm thinking that's probably from the black pastel, and in this case, instead of giving it more of like a ghost-like appearance, essentially what it looks like it's doing is the genes are almost completely separating into different parts of the snake, where the fire kind of lightens the background and then the black pastel gives you these really dark lines around the pattern. Really interesting combination. Alright, so it is time for the question of the day. And Big G asks, When I'm breeding two snakes together, like a lesser to a Mojave, does it matter which one's the male and which one's the female? And that is a very good question. As a matter of fact, I've actually been asked that question quite a few times, and as far as I know, as far as the genetics are concerned, it doesn't really matter which one's the male or which one's the female. You can kind of switch them back and forth. But keep in mind, if you're actually getting into ball pythons for the first time and you're actually buying the female, it takes about 3 years for the female to actually mature. So a lot of times, a lot of people buy the females first and kind of sit on the female for a year or two and then start shopping around for a male so you can breed them. Sometimes you can breed them on the second year, but I'd say it's probably a safe bet to wait till the third year for your females. And the males are, you can actually, a lot of times you can breed a male at about 1 year old, sometimes a year and a half. Males have to be at least 500 grams. Females generally have to be at least 1,500 grams. I would probably wait until my female's a little bit heavier than 1,500 grams before I pair them up for the first time. And as far as other genes, I'd say there's really only one gene that I know of where it does matter what the male is and what the female is, and that's when it comes to coral glow / bananas. A lot of people think that the coral glow and the banana is the same thing, and it's kind of the whole interesting thing with the male makers and the female makers. I actually have a male banana and a male coral glow. Both of those are male makers. So if I breed them to something else, half of the offspring that are bananas come out as males and half of them come out as non-bananas. It's kind of interesting how the gender kind of transfers with the gender, and the pairing of the, it's kind of like the original pairing. So if you actually had a male that came from another male, it would be a male maker. But if you had a male that came from a female, so say for example you had a banana female that laid eggs and you produced a male, then that male would be a female maker. It gets a little bit confusing with the males and the females with the bananas and coral glows. But other than that, if you're breeding anything together, it doesn't matter if it's male or female. So that is pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.